Okay, hi and welcome to Module 8. This is the introduction to the module. It's in the fourth section of our course when we're looking at strategy and market entry, and this week we're looking at strategy and international business. Again, the slides have been adapted by me, developed by me from the resources, the instructor's resources from Hill and Holt International Business. This module is about how companies choose international strategy. Next week's module is on market entry strategy and alliances. Both this week and next week's module align directly with part of the assessment you have in the group assignment. So this week we're going to discuss an international business strategy as an extension of firm strategy, identify the benefits that firms can achieve from expansion internationally, identify and discuss the pressures of synergy and cost. And when we say synergy and cost, that is because some of the models of synergy and cost, some of the models of international business refer to synergy, refer to cost as pressures, and also look at local responsiveness, which is the other set of pressures a firm faces when they go international, and identify and discuss the strategic choices available to firms in response to these in response to these pressures. So which strategy do they choose in response to those pressures? In this introductory lecture and in many of the resources that you have supporting you on Moodle, the videos, the on-campus workshop slides, we're going to review the key concepts. That is again going to be revisited in the Zoom workshop. Netflix in India also addresses those issues, which is the second review of key concept activity, which you do in the forum. And then both in Tuesday's Zoom drop-in session and in the Zoom workshop, we are looking at some theory to practice activity related to the assignment. So let me quickly go through some of these slides, just knowing that a more extensive coverage is available in the videos that support these ideas. Now, the most important part related to international business strategy as an extension of firm strategy is revision. Many of you will have done a strategy course, a strategy unit as part of your degree. Many of you will have done an international management course, introduction to management course as part of your degree. Both of those things feed into international strategy, merely being an extension of firm strategy. So what does that mean? That means that the actions that we take when we go international is purely an extension of the idea of value creation, using the competencies within the firm to create value. Going international, and therefore all the international strategies, can be seen as an extension of the theory of firm diversification. The basic principles of strategy are you're trying to maximize profitability and profit growth while attempting to maintain sustainable competitive advantage. So strategy in the purest sense, in an agency theory sense of how strategy works, is about maximizing the benefit to the owners and shareholders of the company, profitability, profit growth. You can increase your profitability through reduction of costs or through adding value and raising prices, things that you can do by differentiation, or you can increase your profit, increase the value, increase profit growth through entering new markets or selling more in existing markets. And in many cases, firms are traditionally have been driven to go international because they've saturated their local market, or they have some set of skills that they're applying in the local market that are transferable, and they're seeking growth. And they do that through entering new markets. Again, this is a cut-down version of the broader model of strategy that you may have experienced in other units. This is a quick coverage of that background. In value creation, you have two strategies. This is Porter's model of value creation. In value creation, you have two models of strategy, two business level models of strategy. You can do it by reducing your cost or by differentiation. Reducing your cost so that you are more profitable, or differentiating your product so that potential buyers are willing to pay more or be more loyal to your product. Strategic choice, according to Porter, is limited by the internal operations of your firm. So you can do things within your value chain that ultimately can increase efficiency, but ultimately you'll have diminishing returns. One of the ways to deal with diminishing returns is to position your firm in a particular way. You position your firm to maximize profitability, which means you're configuring all the internal aspects of your value chain to achieve the greatest value added through your processes, either through cost reduction or through differentiation. You're accessing others' value chains, sometimes in your supply chain. The value chain of your internal operations is manufacturing, marketing, logistics, information systems, human resources, etc. And some of those are primary operations in your firm, things like inward logistics, manufacturing, outward logistics, sales, or their support activities like information systems, human resources, finance. It's important to ensure that your firm has the right organisational structure to achieve its strategy, because the aim of having your value chain running in the most effective way is to gain a competitive advantage and superior profitability within the market that you're operating in. Sometimes firms use the value chains of others. So the value chain that Apple uses to get Fox to actually build its products means they're using aspects of Fox's value chain to feed into the production of iPhone. And many companies use Fox in the way to do that. So the value chain has those activities, value creation activities, which form together into this grouping of primary and support activities, as mentioned. This should all be revision, which is why I'm not going to talk about it anymore. One of the ways to increase value is through diversification. And one of the forms of diversification is seeking new markets. And one of the forms of seeking new markets is going international. So when we're going international, when we're looking at how our firms grow internationally, we have to consider that from the perspective of what are you trying to achieve and what's driving you to go international. What benefits are you trying to achieve and what's driving you? In the traditional model, the model that we're looking at in this course, because this course we're spending 1 week on international strategy, is, and I've taught courses at other universities when we spent the whole semester on international business strategy. In this week, what we're looking at is how we leverage products and our competencies to expand into an external market. That's the basis of a firm's competitive advantage. You can gain from those bedrock characteristics by looking at location economies. Location economies is merely locating operations of your company in the area where it will produce the most value. The most value through reducing costs, so you may want to move from where you're operating in some manufacturing plant in Australia to manufacture in a lower cost environment where you'll be able to produce the most differentiation. You might want to, if you're a pharmaceutical company, locate your pharmaceutical R&D teams in the countries that have the best universities or the highest number of skilled labour. Sometimes, in fact, it's about ensuring that you're reducing cost because you have the appropriately qualified people at the right price. Sometimes differentiation can come from other sources. Other ways that you can reduce cost, maybe by reducing transportation costs, by locating your production facilities or your service facilities closest to where your customers are or to where the input materials are. If reduce cost through avoiding tariffs because you're in the right geographical area, you're in a regional cooperative environment which enables you not to pay tariffs because you're operating within that area, or you're receiving particular subsidies because you've decided to locate in a particular place. One of the reasons that the Queensland government and every other government on the East Coast is offering subsidies to establish Virgin's head office in their state is because they are offering locational advantages because they see some longer term employment and development option that will benefit society if Virgin locates their head office there. So they're offering incentives like payroll tax incentives, like investment incentives, and a range of other things. The second group of the second area that you can gain advantage is because you move along the experience curve through your operations. You're trying to benefit from the learnings you've achieved in your organisation. You're trying to gain economies of scale. You're trying to reduce costs in production as your output increases. And as you move along the experience curve, you get better and better and better at doing something. So sometimes you are the most experienced in your local market, or you've developed a particular product, particular set of manufacturing skills, particular marketing skill, particular competencies that you then will transfer to a lower cost environment or transfer into a new market that you can be competitive in. And thirdly, you're trying to look at how you leverage the skills that might exist in a subsidiary in a foreign country to create value in a global network. So VW, even though they are a German company, have 33 joint venture and wholly owned subsidiaries operating in China because they're gaining particular sets of value, particular sets of benefits, particular sets of skill and knowledge and location advantages by locating there. Which brings us to the end of our sort of look at the background of strategy and to the core area that we're focusing on in this module. What are the pressures for synergy or cost reduction and local responsiveness that a firm faces that influences the nature of the strategy that they follow? And as I mentioned, there are videos covering every section of this, example videos covering all these things on the Moodle website. So according to Goschel and Bartlett, and this is one of many Goschel and Bartlett models that use the word slightly differently to describe basically the same principles. There is one set of pressure, which is the pressure for cost reduction or the pressure for integration and synergy, that is designed to assist the firm to lower the costs of its operations and create value. This pressure for cost reduction is greatest in commodity type products, but we're also seeing the commoditization of some industrial products in the supply chain, in the nature of computer chips, for example. You get a manufacturing commoditization as well. It works in industries where major competitors are based in low-cost locations, and then when there's persistent excess capacity, where consumers are powerful and face low switching costs. So even televisions, for example, are faced with this pressure for synergy and cost reduction. Because ultimately consumer doesn't care where it comes from and is a bit flexible about what they are going to buy. So you have, and often buy on price versus a set of differentiation values that exist as well. The pressure for local responsiveness is about responding to differences in local markets. The difference between, say, the Thai market and the UAE market, the United Arab Emirates market, the differences between China and Australia, where there's customer demands particular local customization. And in those cases, there's pressure for local responsiveness. It may be that pressure may come just from customer demands, but it may also come from differences in infrastructure and traditional practices. So in a country like Australia with, frankly, average internet, some of the delivery methods for services and goods cannot work as well as they can in a country with better internet, but still work better with a country with worse internet. In a country that has high levels of transportation infrastructure, Australia, the ability to deliver good and high mobility in a large middle class population who tend to have their own vehicles, a particular delivery of retail occurs differently than it would in countries where the majority of people or a significant proportion of people don't own their own vehicles, travel by public transport, have just moved out of predominantly agricultural into predominantly low-level manufacturing roles. So you get differences in the product demand and differences in the nature of products and differences in the expectation. So I've mentioned some of those distribution channels. Host country demands is the last one I want to mention. Host country demands are things like economic and political structures that require particular types of operation. If you are a bank, you must have a banking license. To have a banking license in Australia, there's a fair amount of liberalness. To have a banking license in Thailand, you must have a particular proportion of people that are and investors that are local Thai investors. There are incentives that encourage firms to have joint ventures or at least to have a physical presence. There are tariff barriers that may restrict your ability to export and therefore encourage you to manufacture locally. There may be benefits from appearing to manufacture locally. And we have a rise in regionalism that also reflects and expands local responsiveness, where we get tastes and preferences and infrastructure from different channels affecting a broader geographical area such as the European Union or NAFTA, USMCA, or the Australia-New Zealand, or a range, or AFTA in Asia, that we get a broader region that have particular responsiveness needed. So those structures lead us to having four options in international strategy. International strategy, which is sometimes called international business strategy, transnational strategy, localized strategy, and globalized strategy. Now, remember I mentioned earlier that this is Bartlett and Goschel's model, and some of the words are a bit different than you may have seen in Bartlett and Goschel's models elsewhere, or Goschel and Bartlett, or Goschel and Gondovindian. All of these are explaining the same things, they're just talking about them slightly differently. In some models, you'll see that as an international business strategy. Sorry, I've just clicked one forward, and these three as corporate level strategies. So let's have a quick look at what that means. Pressures for cost reduction, pressures for synergy on this axis, pressure for local responsiveness on this action. So if there's low pressures for local responsiveness and low pressures for synergy, you can follow basically the business level strategy that you're following in your home country. And this is sometimes called an export strategy, but doesn't necessarily have to be only an export strategy. You're not changing your product. You're using the sources of competitive advantage that you've gained in your local market, and you are either exporting, or you're usually exporting, but you don't have very much adaptation to respond. In this case too, because you already have the competitive advantage, there might not be any pressure for you to align yourself with a global value chain to be able to achieve that goal. Pressures for cost reduction are often related to, as I've mentioned before, membership of a particular region, or access to low-cost resources, or access to the right resources, or integrating complex value chains across the world. So we see one of the reasons why the US and Australia do not produce the precursors for pharmaceuticals, which has been talked about a lot in the COVID crisis, and even if and beyond that, most of those are produced in China, and then most generic drugs, generic pharmaceuticals, are then manufactured in India, as well as many proprietary pharmaceuticals, are manufactured in India using precursor materials, using chemicals that are made in China before they get exported to Australia or America. Right? That's a global value chain. Why is that happening? Because there was pressures for cost reduction in what is essentially a protected industry. And then when it became a generic industry, still pressures for cost reduction. Standardized products sold globally. Localization strategy, sometimes called multi-domestic strategy, is when you have to adapt your product to different needs in different markets. So high need to respond to differences in the market. And finally, a transnational strategy aims to gain the benefits of globalization and the benefits of localization, doing them both at once. Risk is you're stuck in the middle, but there are firms that achieve both of these. Coca-Cola arguably is a firm that does that. The slides that follow this talk about the links between which strategy is most appropriate, and there are video explanations on the Moodle website that describe that as well. Now, I know that I flitted through these 30-odd slides quite quickly because these were designed just to be an introduction and the background resources for you to do the preparatory work. So, for the Zoom workshop on Friday, watch the Goschel and Bartlett framework, watch the video and use the video in your textbook and your personal knowledge to identify a firm that is, and identify firms that are reflecting each of those 4 strategies. Support that with you. If you might have personal knowledge, we can use the business media to do that. Come to the workshop ready to discuss. In the Moodle forum, we're going to look at why Netflix is struggling in India. And there's a number of questions. Again, it goes back to the Goschel and Bartlett model. And the other thing we're going to be doing in the workshop on Friday is some work on your assignment, which this is one of the areas that relate to your assignment, question 3 in your assignment, but also we'll have had some time to discuss that in subsequent Tuesday drop-in sessions. So what I've tried to do in this introduction is cover briefly the 4 main objectives and direct you to what you need to be looking at